Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome to another episode of Martial Arts Theater 3000. Today I'm doing a video that is my top 5 Hong Kong directors of all time. And this is a collaboration with the Asian Cinema Circle. And the members of the Asian Cinema Circle are Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, Hong Kong Blu-rays, TheFanaticalDragon, Fan Dojo, Flip Otaku, A Touch of Film, Them's Fighting Words, CoolMovieGram, and Amphlett Reviews. So definitely check out their channels as well, as they're going to be doing videos on their top 5 Hong Kong directors of all time. And if you're new to the channel and you love Kung Fu cinema like myself, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. So jumping right into it here, at number 5, I have Joseph Kwo. The way I would sum up Joseph Kwo is when you wanted to describe to someone a Chinese Kung Fu movie, or a Kung Fu movie in general from the 70s and 80s, and how they would picture a Kung Fu movie in a parody, Joseph Kwo kind of encapsulates that notion. Now, a lot of the silliness in these movies and the cheesiness, if you will, that makes them fun is often amplified by the English dub. So I need to say that because, for instance, one of Joseph Kwo's greatest movies, Mystery of Chess Boxing, the different unintentional comedic moments that comes out when you add the English dub to the aesthetic they're going for, it's just the quintessential lighthearted, fun Kung Fu movie experience. And of course, there's the influence on hip-hop that Kung Fu movies have, and A Mystery of Chess Boxing is all over Wu-Tang Clan. They use the title for a song, and Ghostface Killer is one of the rappers, of course. And don't get me wrong, Joseph Kwo has a lot of serious moments intertwined, and it's kind of that mix that sums him up. I would call it a cheesy aesthetic to a degree, some silliness, but that coupled with a serious plot and some excellent kung fu that kind of brings the Joseph Kwo experience, if you will. And his fight scenes are great. There's a little bit of undercranking, which, is where they slow the camera frames per second down as they film, and when they play it back at normal speed, it's a hair faster, and sometimes a few hairs faster. And not only will you see some of that in his fight scenes, but you'll also see something I've noticed more recently when watching the Cinematic Vengeance box set, which I'll put in one of my old videos here. I'll play while I'm talking. I've noticed that Joseph, he will chop out chunks of the fight scene to make it move faster, but the guy teleports, or both of the people fighting teleports to another part of the screen, and it makes it seem faster, but it's pretty choppy. I kind of like it though, and at first I wasn't sure if they were frames that were cut out due to damage, but when you see it in a lot of his fight scenes, it seems like it's an intentional element. And while I'm doing these top directors, I wanted to give 2 movies I wanted to focus on, because I could easily give 4 or 5, but to whittle it down, Mystery of Chess Boxing, like I mentioned, from 1979, that is one you have to see. That is just, it's so much fun from front to back. The fight scenes are incredible, and you probably recognize a lot of the one-liners in it if you're watching the English dub. And a personal favorite of mine is Unbeaten 28. And I still have the challenge out there. If anyone can tell me what Unbeaten 28 means, I don't know, I have a prize for you, because it doesn't quite make any sense when you watch the movie. I know there's a part where he has to pass 18 challenges, but that's 18, so I still just can't figure out where the 28 comes in, and I kind of love it for that. But I rented this movie when I was young, 8 or 9 years old, from I think Giant Eagle in Cranberry, Pennsylvania. Giant Eagle. I rented this one, and gosh, it's a great one. The narration is hysterical. There's so much reverb on this guy's vocals. I mean, I think it inspired half the hair bands in the 80s. And this just sums up everything I said about Joseph Kwo. It has silliness, it has cheesiness at times, but the fight scenes are fantastic, awesome training, hysterical narration, and the end fight is really good, but the fights along the way are just stellar. Even from the opening credits, the opening fight you'll see what I'm talking about. Definitely check out Unbeaten 28. Coming in at number 4, we have Lee So-nam. I love Lee So-nam because, as you guys know, I'm a huge Bruceploitation fan, and he has directed some of the most well-known and my personal favorite Bruceploitation movie, Fist of Fury 2. And I think Fist of Fury 2 is actually a perfect example and a way to explain Lee So-nam's style. Lee So-nam in a lot of ways reminds me of Joseph Quo. Now, he's definitely a little more serious. He really focuses on the build-up, and in Fist of Fury 2, that is a great example. I think it's about a half hour to 45 minutes before Bruce Lee appears on screen, and I would say the movie's a bit more slow, and I tend to like some slowness in my movies if it has, if there's a payoff to it all and it helps enrich the plot. And for how cool and collected Bruce Lee's character is in this movie, he's just pushed and pushed, and when he hits his breaking point, that's where this movie just takes off. And I highly recommend Lee So-nam's Fist of Fury Part 2. Not only do you have what I consider easily in the top 3 of Bruceploitation movies, you have a great example of Lee So-nam's style. He really likes to film at nighttime. This is something that Michael Worth from the Clones Cast podcast, he pointed that out, and after I heard him say that, watching his movies, he does have a lot of nighttime shots. Talking about those points, I was speaking with Sean from Food for Thought, which is an awesome page you should check out. It's Food for Thought, and you can definitely check out their podcast as well. I listen to it all the time, and I'm a big fan. But talking to Sean about Lee So-nam, he said he agreed and said he was less corny of a director, less outlandish. And while he's not highbrow, he described him as the thinking man's kung fu movie director, in a way. And I think that really sums it all up. And I was also talking to my buddy Tarquin Bennett Coles about him, and he commented how it's his ability to dial up the drama, makes you empathize with the main protagonists, that makes you really root for them when it comes to the key moments or the payoff of the whole movie. It was fun to discuss this director with a couple other people to see how others saw him, and it seems like there's a general consensus that he goes for a little more seriousness, but he doesn't deny us the silly moments throughout that you'll see a little more in the Joseph Quo style. And some of his other best ones, The Hot, the Cool, and the Vicious. You have The Leg Fighters, which was released by Pearl River recently, or in the past couple years. Definitely check out that one. There's some more Bruceploitation ones. Edge of Fury, which is just a solid Bruce Lee one again. Eagle's Claws is excellent. And Tattoo Connection with Jim Kelly. But my favorite Lee So-nam movie, and a lot of people's favorite kung fu movie overall, I've ascertained over the years, is Shaolin versus Lama. You guys got to check out this movie. I know a lot of the hardcore fans have definitely seen this one multiple times, but it is just a great kung fu movie all around. It has the build-ups I talked about that Lee So-nam is so great at, and it has a character transformation that, and this is one that I saw when I was really young, but even at 8 or 9 years old, I knew there was something special about this movie. It felt a bit long, but watching it now when you're older, you could see it's to give that transformation of the main character. And this movie, just the fights are incredible, the choreography is incredible, the plot and the whole build up to the end fights, and the end fight itself is, you guys just have to check out this movie. Shaolin versus Lama is the crowning jewel of Lee So-nam's filmography, in my opinion. Coming in at number 3, we have John Woo. Now, John Woo was an understudy of Chang Cheh. Chang Cheh was like his idol and his mentor, and that's a great starting point to understand John Woo's style. Not only did John Woo use a lot of the elements that Chang Cheh inspired and taught him, he kind of threw gasoline on Chang Cheh's style. Almost just an exaggeration of Chang Cheh's style at the beginning, and then it slowly morphs into John Woo's signature style, which is fully his own, but with Chang Cheh influences, of course. And as he progressed in his career, I feel he really came into his own on Last Hurrah for Chivalry. It has Wai Pei, and it has a lot of, like I said, the feelings of a Chang Cheh movie, but with John Woo just exaggerating so many of the elements and mixing wuxia and Western films, mixing those styles together. And you can see just the seeds being planted for what's going to happen in the 80s. Even though we're still using swords at this point, you can see just the John Woo, his love for theatrics. Everything is exaggerated, and he kind of adds a majestic vibe to each scene. It gives a great effect, and you could see the influence later on Quentin Tarantino and multiple directors that really draw out the Mexican standoff style before the fight. And after that movie really solidified his directing skills, in my opinion, he moved on to the 80s. And once he got to A Better Tomorrow, I feel like that movie truly put him on the map. And it made a star out of Chow Yun-fat, who in a way was like John Woo's muse. And all of these elements came together at the same time. You have Chow Yun-fat, just excellent in Better Tomorrow 2, then on to The Killer. That's one I actually haven't seen yet. I still want to see that one. And John Woo basically invented the gun fu genre. It's like the Chang-Chi movies, like Last Hurrah for Chivalry, with the build-ups and the incredible fight scenes, but they're using guns. When you watch these movies, if you go back to Better Tomorrow and all these, you can see how the influence just influenced so many action directors later on, using two guns at the same time. Some things that you take for granted, John Woo really pioneered a lot of those techniques. So once he really pioneered this gun fu style, he went and ran with it, and it crescendoed at his finest film, in my opinion, Hard Boiled, in 1992. And oh man, when I first saw that fight scene in the tea house when Chow Yun-fat comes down those stairs, oh my gosh, I just knew like a new era was upon us. And it had been building with A Better Tomorrow and all those things, but that was like in the mid 80s, and I hadn't seen all those movies when I was young. I watched them later, but Hard Boiled was my introduction into this genre in the early 90s. I had to go show all my friends, have them rent it. That scene is something, if you want to impress someone with a kung fu movie genre or representation of gun fu, you got to put on the opening scene of Hard Boiled. The movie is just incredible. There's a straightaway at the end, which has a scene that has no edits at all, which is super impressive. And John Woo, he just took it up another 10 notches, it felt like. And this movie propelled him into Hollywood. He did Face Off with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, which is ridiculous, but very well done. They did Mission Impossible 2, which is considered one of the lesser of the Mission Impossible movies, but he got to really shine in that and make it a John Woo style film, which I respect him for. Growing up, I always loved Van Damme, and Hard Target is a Van Damme highlight. And props to John Woo if he had anything to do with that majestic mullet that Van Damme has in that movie. Wow. It's one of the calling cards of that movie. And the other calling card would be John Woo's use of slow-mo. Now, there was slow-mo in a lot of the movies coming up, you know, and definitely in Hard Boiled, and it's kind of like his style, and I think that influenced the video game Max Payne later, where you can fly through the air with two guns in super slow-mo. It's like John Woo, he just changed like multiple genres just by exaggerating these techniques that he was taught along the way and influenced with. But in Hard Target, my gosh, I swear every fight scene is like half in slow-mo, and I dig it. I like it. I saw it in the theater in 1993. It doesn't slow down the action. It gives it that like a Matrix feel to it, where it just, you really see this one technique and how it lands and the impact of it all. Yeah, so I have John Woo firmly at number 3 here, and the two movies I would recommend from him would be Hard Target for, you know, some Van Damme-age, some Van Damme action, and definitely Hard Boiled. Coming in at number 2 is the late, great Lau Kar Leung, one of the greatest directors of all time, not even just Hong Kong directors. He is just a master Now, Lau Kar Leung, he began as Chang Che's choreographer. That's where he really started. You know, he did the choreography on all those early Chang Che movies, you know, from, I can't remember the starting point, I think late 60s, 68, 69, all the way up to 74, 75. The thing about Lau Kar Leung is he is like the opposite of an actor that learned Kung Fu. He is a true Kung Fu practitioner, trained from a young age and very true to the traditional and authentic Kung Fu styles. And this is what he incorporated into Chang Che's movies, which was great to see. You know, in all those movies, you can see Lau Kar Leung's awesome choreography. But when he went off on his own and started directing his own movies, he got great actors who could also do Kung Fu very well, and he made them really lean into the tradition of it. He wanted to display and celebrate true Kung Fu. And when I say that, it's like he doesn't mix in like crazy wrestling and kickboxing and some stuff that I love when you'll see in Jackie Chan movies, like a hybrid. This is like, if you want to see true authentic Shaolin Kung Fu and Hung Gar and all these different styles, Lau Kar Leung movies are the way to go. I do have to say, I do think Lau Kar Leung is technically the best when it comes to Hong Kong movies and directors and Kung Fu movie directors. He really honed in his craft. Each movie, like, you could tell it's a Lau Kar Leung movie, but each one just progressed and he kept changing it up in a certain way and improving as it goes along. And, you know, one of my favorite early ones from him, I think it's his third or fourth movie, is Executioners from Shaolin. That's a great example of his style. Now, it's a bit of a slower movie, you know. I've said that a few times on here. I like the slow build-up. I don't know what it is. I'm one of the guys that liked Eyes Wide Shut. And you know, as long as the plot's really good, I feel it gives a lot of room for character development. And that's an important thing about these movies and Lau Kar Leung movies, is it's not just about the fight scenes. He really flipped it on its head that, yes, you could just watch the fight scenes, which I would not recommend, but his movies, the reason there's so much weight and gravitas to these fights in his movies is you are so connected to the character and you've seen the trials and tribulations going along. And Executioners from Shaolin is a great example of that. Chen Kun Tai, he's just a man possessed trying to take on Priest Pai Mei and seek his revenge for all his brothers that were slain. That's the thing. It's not just, oh, check out that fight scene. You're just, in every moment, you're rooting for him. You feel his pain. And that's what takes these movies up a notch, and something that I love about his films. So after Executioners, he went straight into 36 Chambers of Shaolin, known in the States as Master Killer. And I would say this is his crowning achievement, his best movie. And it's so hard to lock down a top 5, but 36 Chamber of Shaolin, it has to be up towards the top. I mean, it has incredible training scenes. Gordon Liu playing Sante, it's just such a great role, and it is kind of like the quintessential Kung Fu movie. The training along the way, I can't even imagine how many movies that inspired, all the way, you know, up to Karate Kid. And I say like 3/4 of this movie is training, and it's better for it. And as the 70s ended and he went into the 80s, it started to get a little more of wire work. The fight scenes were a little more faster paced, which is nice. In the late 70s, when Jackie Chan really changed the box office by all the movies after he did Drunken Master were trying to cash in on comedic Kung Fu, which isn't my favorite style. I think Jackie Chan is great at that, but when other directors try to, imitate that, I think it's definitely hit or miss at best. But Lau Kar Leung definitely had a few movies like that, and then he did the 8-Diagram Pole Fighter, which is another top tier one that you got to check out. That movie is not a comedic one. The fight scenes are ferocious. Gordon Liu really takes the spotlight after Alexander Fusheng sadly died, and you guys got to check out that one. If somehow you've not seen the 8-Diagram Pole Fighter, go watch it now. And another one you got to check out is Heroes of the East. I don't want to go over like 10 million movies of his, because as I keep going here, I just want to talk about them all. That's how great his filmography is. I'd say Heroes of the East and 36 Chamber of Shaolin are my favorite, and I think amongst his best. And then the runner-up, trying to get into that top 2, would be 8-Diagram Pole Fighter. And coming in at number 1, if you've been following my channel for a while, this shouldn't be a big surprise. We have the legendary Chang Che. He's been called the godfather of Kung Fu movies for good reason. he directed almost 100 movies, which is unbelievable. Some years it was like 10 to 12 movies in the 1972-1973 range. Chang Cheh, he just has such a distinctive style, and I'd like to break up his filmography into 3 periods. You have the initial period. Well, he's been directing for many decades, but when he really came into his own and started getting the #1 hits was with 1967's One-Armed Swordsman with Jimmy Wang Yu. And this is kind of like the starting point of the golden age of Kung Fu cinema. Something that's important to note is in the 60s and I guess the late 50s as well, in Hong Kong, all the men were at work and the women would, go to the theater. So the movies really tried to cater to women audiences. The heroes were women, and it had that aspect to all the movies. Now Chang Cheh wanted to focus more on men being the heroes in these films and the main protagonists. And it goes a little further than that. Once he hit his stride, honestly, there's not that many women in a lot of his movies. They have kind of like brief roles, and there's not a ton of romances. I believe that's because he really wanted to focus on male camaraderie, and that's kind of how I would sum up Chang Cheh's movies. It really focuses on the blood brother aspect. It has that thread through all his different periods. So you have that first period of One-Armed Swordsman and Return of the One-Armed Swordsman, great movies there. Then there was a falling out with Jimmy Wang Yu and Chang Cheh, and Jimmy Wang Yu kept going on and doing One-Armed Boxer, One-Armed this, that, and Chang Cheh wanted to trump him. So the rivalry began, and Chang Cheh did the new One-Armed Swordsman with David Chiang. Now this period here went on to, this is considered like Chang Cheh's first team, went on to have tons of movies with T. Leung and David Chiang, and I love these movies. And then they're often referred to as the Iron Triangle, being David Chiang, T. Leung, and Chen Quan Tai. And there's so many movies in this period. The Heroic Ones is one of my favorites. You got to see that. David Chiang's unreal in that. Vengeance is another high point. And then you have The Water Margin and the whole series, and it led into the Shaolin cycle, where Chang Cheh went over to Taiwan, still under Shaw Brothers, but it kind of was a period where it started to slowly phase out the T. Leung and the David Chiang, and then it went into the Venoms. And as you know, I am a huge Venom mob fan. When it comes to Kung Fu movies in general, the Venoms are just my favorite. And they were initially, bit part players in these movies, stuntmen based out of Taiwan. And I'm going to do my own video on who were the Venoms, and I'll break down everything about them in that one. But for this, all you really need to know is there were some movies that led up as it phased out of the first team, and it had like Chinatown Kid, which is a good blend of Fu Shang, and the Venoms were coming into their own. And then you got hit with 1978's Five Deadly Venoms. Now I have to say, this has to be the most popular Kung Fu movie of the Hong Kong movies outside of Bruce Lee for American audiences. Because if you just go into any online forum or Facebook page and say, what's your favorite Kung Fu movie, I swear, and it seems to be growing, everyone just yells Five Deadly Venoms. Ironically, I don't think it's one of the Venom's best movies. I think it's a great movie in that it has a lot of mystery and a killer plot, but for a Kung Fu movie, the action is a little bit sparse, relatively speaking. But please don't get me wrong, it's one of my favorites overall, and it's an absolute classic, and it kicked off my favorite period, being this Venom's period from 1978 to 1982 roughly. And in those 4 years, this is kind of like Chang Cheh's swan song, the end of his period at Shaw Brothers. You have Crippled Avengers, Killer Army, the Daredevils. I mean, I love them all. They're all so great. There's a couple ones that are just not quite as good, but there's just so many high points and great ones, like Masked Avengers is a personal favorite that if you guys want to go on a Venom's run and just watch all of them, you'll be so pleased. It is just amazing choreography. The 3 Venoms that did the choreography were Chang Cheng, Lu Feng, and Guok Choi. And then after some of the Venoms started to leave working with Chang Cheh, and Guok Choi went off to do his own movie on his own, Chang Che filmed one of his crowning jewels, 5-Element Ninjas. I have a video where I review this if you want to check it out in my channel, but this movie is just like Chang Che took everything up a notch. There's so much blood, so many fight scenes, and someone on my Instagram page once said it feels like a video game, and that's a great way to describe it. You got to see this movie if you happen to have not been able to see it. It was known in the US as Super Ninjas. And for Chang Che's 3 different periods, I'm just going to pick one from each time period there. So I'd say definitely One-Armed Swordsman for the initial late 60s era. Then when it got to the T. Leung and David Chang period, I'd go with Heroic Ones. Definitely check out that one. And then for the Venoms, I got to go with Crippled Avengers being the greatest Venom movie. But definitely check out 5-Element Ninjas. It's not truly a Venoms movie as it only has Lo Mang in it, but it's kind of like the last hurrah for all these movies for Chang Che. He did some movies after it, of course, but this is kind of like the end of his run at Shaw Brothers, more or less. There was like 2 more released from there, but this is like his swan song for sure. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed my top 5 Hong Kong directors. Please go in the description box down below and check out the other members of the Asian Cinema Circle's videos they did on their YouTube channels. And as always, thank you guys for the support, and I'll talk to you guys soon.